Okay, so we're going to jump into it. This is the last kind of interview of the day. The first question that I make everyone tell me is, can you please introduce yourself for all of the listeners?
Right. Yeah. So, as opposed to what the name says at the bottom of my screen, I'm not Scott the Young. I am Jonathan Provost. I was born and raised here in Tiohtià, Montreal. Uh, did my undergrad at McGill University in teaching English as a second language before moving to Concordia for my master's in educational studies, which is what kind of brings me here because my that's where I wrote my directed study on education and games. So I'm an educator à la base, but with a great passion for games that I'm I'm quite happy to be given a platform to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to really dig into it because in that directed study, you kind of wrote some really interesting research around thinking about the implementation of games in the education space and kind of the challenges and difficulties and aspects of kind of critical education there. So could you, because it was about critical education as a whole, so could you just, for anyone who doesn't know what critical education is, kind of explain that concept and how that relates to games?
Yeah, that's right. So my directed study was basically exactly as you said about the implementation of video games in critical pedagogy, critical education, and what critical pedagogy is this philosophy, I guess you could say, of pedagogy developed by a Brazilian educator in the 20th century called Paulo Freire, and it it can be a lot of things, but basically the main idea is that it's meant to use education as something that's emancipatory, that's liberatory, that is meant to have students work in tandem with educators instead of the hierarchy that you see in the current educational system. And you have teachers, well, educators and students working in tandem in order to understand how the world works. And once you get that basic idea of, okay, this is how these systems of oppression, these systems of power work in the world, how do we make a better one together? Right, working with the students, what their ideas are, what their knowledge, what their experiences are, and using that to come together, find new ways of being and thinking, as opposed to going like, well, you guys, you think this, but how the world actually works is this. So sit down, shut up, and get back to work.
And so how do games kind of interject as a form of critical pedagogy? I mean, how can they perhaps be in that space?
Yes, how can they is probably the best way to phrase it, because it's really a question of potential, right? I believe I use in my actual paper, I use the word like tool very often because it what I see a lot with talk about games and education is that games don't become a tool; they just become like the answer. It's like, oh well, if you use video games in your class, then you're good. That's it. You did your job. But video games are a tool among many others, particularly in media, movies and books and all that, that can be used to either make students more interested in the topic at hand, or make things more understandable. Now, what I mean by that is that video games have this really interesting way of conveying meaning, and that's what a lot of academic papers talk about, and that I go over in the paper. Video games are really good at creating worlds and creating systems, obviously. So having players, ergo students, play these games, understand the systems of these games, are a really good way of presenting the world, right? If you make a game that has a very in-depth political system, or a very in-depth environmental system, very in-depth economic system, among plenty of others, playing around in that is a really good way of having students understand, oh, okay, here are the boundaries of that system. Here are different things that I can do within the system and that I can't do. And that's actually maybe even more interesting. Like, oh, here I am playing The Sims, and I want to have this minimalist life, but the tools that are given to me in this game don't really allow me to do that, right? So what does that kind of say about the system that's presented in the game? How does that say? What does that say about consumerism? What does that say about capitalist idea of growth and all that? So that's kind of an interesting thing that video games can do in a general sense without going too much into the nitty gritty.
So I do have a question kind of on that conversation of complexity.
Right.
Because I totally understand what you're saying of like when you make a complex system, kids are then going to play it, or not even kids, anyone's going to play that, and they're going to learn the boundaries of that system, what's right, what's wrong, and part of that simulated complex system will teach them things. Mm-hmm. However, sometimes making a system like that is really complex, and it's really complex to do, and for the player, it's a really complex kind of like agreeance to kind of engage in. Like it's not an easy thing all the time. And so how do you balance complexity with, you know, the ability of the players? Like, should we make complex games and just throw them at students and hope they can figure them out? Or where do we kind of draw that line for like accessibility to kind of get into those games in the first place?
Now, I think that's interesting because I think accessibility is probably one of the biggest challenges regarding games in education. First of all, in, you know, the way you're talking about, which is accessibility of I don't know, the capacity of understanding games, the media literacy of playing games, right? And there's also the question of accessibility, just straight up the tools. You know, not every school can have like computers and stuff.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, you know, short answer is I don't know, like that it just kind of sucks that accessibility will always be an issue, but also it can be, there can be a spectrum of it. There can be and any game designer, I mean, that's the panel that comes after this, I think, is a panel of educational game designers, and they'll probably touch on that in that any designer thinks about, okay, how complex can I make this? For you know, for my own sanity of like I'm making this damn game, and B, you know, the players, I need them to be actually able to play the game.
Yeah, it's that balance of legibility.
Exactly. Really, like how legible can I make this? I would love to be a nerd and make this game the craziest possible thing, but I want people to play the game also. So there's a sacrifice that has to be made there, but that's often on the designer's part. So there are games that are way more complex than others. I mean, I talk about a lot in my paper, Dwarf Fortress. I talk about that game that actually just recently got its like 1.0 release, I think a few weeks ago.
Exactly. It's pretty exciting. I don't know if you played it. It's not bad.
I haven't personally because it's so hard. but I read about it and watched it a lot. I watch people play it a lot. And that game, I mean, it's extremely complex. For those who don't know, Dwarf Fortress is a, I guess, colony simulation game, you could say.
Yeah. You're building your mines.
Yeah, basically. Like think Sims that I mentioned earlier, but you know, way bigger. Think Sim City, I guess.
Yeah. Managing a lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, there are so many variables and factors that go into Dwarf Fortress that make it so not a single playthrough will be the same. You know, you'll either make a great colony that has many riches and a deep history, or you'll have one that has existed for 200 years and the thing, you know, implodes because cats started eating, you know, all the crops or something. It sounds ridiculous, but that's actually, I'm sure that's happened.
I mean, I think that's games in general.
That's true. Yeah.
They have that bit of ridiculousness to them. And I also feel like sometimes when we talk about games, there can be a lot of like excitement and hype around them, not just because they can be silly and fun and engaging ways, but also just for like their potential. Like a lot of people are like, oh, if we make a game about that, we'll get everyone in. So do you think that sometimes games are overhyped?
Yes, yes. Absolutely. Like I kind of mentioned it earlier when I said that people in the world of education at least kind of see it as an answer. They're like, oh well, we'll just make a game about it and kids will love it. And there's a truth to that. Um, any teacher will tell you that when you're in the classroom and you go, hey, today we're gonna go on, we're gonna play a game. We're gonna even something simple like Kahoot. The kids will go nuts for it. They're like, oh hell yes, competition, and also I don't have to be in school. But that's like that's kind of its own thing. Where are games fun or does school just suck?
I mean, that's actually a really interesting question to think about of like, are games actually offering the thing that we want or not? I mean, in the space, we have a bunch of games set up, and one of them is like a math game on the Atari where you literally just input your digits to the answer of a math question. And I asked a kid, I was like, would you call this a good game? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, why? And they're like, because it's better than a worksheet. And I'm like, okay, but is that the line that we really want to be at, right? Like, I guess if we can say games are then arguably not overhyped if the comparison is a worksheet, but in capacity they kind of still are overhyped. Or
yeah, again it comes kind of like to the designers, where what do you want? What's the end game here? What is it that you want to convey, and why do you want it conveyed in that way, right? Do you just want to put math problems, but instead of writing it down, you're typing it in, and there's sounds that come out when you do it? Is it I guess the crux of it is like, is it a game or is it a gamified homework?
It's true.
Right.
But I kind of want to swing for as a final question back to you, what you were kind of just saying, like, what is for you the end result or the end game?
So, I mean, I'll circle back to my paper to kind of my semi-conclusion there, which also kind of ties back into the idea of accessibility. I think that games, or the talk of games in education, is done a lot without thinking of education. It's done a lot without thinking of pedagogues. It's done a lot without thinking of teachers. It kind of just goes, okay, there's a game, you put it in a classroom, and that's it. Games are really good at teaching stuff. Their games are really good at scaffolding learning. Therefore, put a game and you're good. And the teacher just, where's the teacher there? The teacher just kind of puts the game and goes like,
yeah,
right. That was to the kids, not to force space. But what I mean to say there is that there's kind of we kind of forget that teachers exist in the classroom, and that if you put a game there, and question of accessibility, kids are like, I don't know what's going on. What am I doing here? Blah, blah, blah. And the teacher's like, fuck if I know. I don't know either. Like, I'm just here. I thought you guys are the young ones. And I see it as a teacher with stuff like iPads and just general computer stuff, that kids are trying to get this to work, and then they're like, I don't get it. How do I do this? And the teacher's like, I don't know. You're the one who's supposed to know this. So I think how I see games in education is it has to come with way more teacher agency. Teachers curating, teachers interpreting, teachers playing the games. They can't just be like, this game looks cool. In my paper, 90% of the games that I talk about are games that I care about, that I know about, that I'm not just going, I don't know, this game seems vaguely academic.
I just thrown it in there.
Why not? It looks cool.
I thought for sure your academic paper was full of anecdotes that made no sense to your actual claim. I kid, of course.
For sure.
But no, you raised like a really good point of like, part of it is we can't just make tools that just sit in a classroom and get played all the time. But
Yeah,
like, and it goes both ways. Like, we can't just have a teacher boot up a computer, as you're saying, and just have a pluck a student in front of it and go play, and you'll learn everything you need to know. And we can't have developers expecting that.
exactly.
But it kind of is, we have to address both almost simultaneously to kind of move both up.
Teachers, and that's kind of something that the aforementioned Paulo Freire talked about. They're kind of forgotten a lot in the educational system. It's very top down. It's very, okay, here's the content we want you to teach. And much like they expect the teachers to tell the kids to sit down, shut up, the top down aspect is also telling the teachers to, sit down and be the talking piece.
Yeah, just drop it and go, right?
Exactly. So the focus here is, which much easier said than done, but it's what's so great about events like this, or events by other game organizations. I'd say it's usually grassroots stuff, but that go like, hey, we're going to go around, do workshops and panels and stuff, and show educators the potential games that they can play, or the things that they can think about when implementing games in their classroom. And here are ways that you can take a game that's not even necessarily educational and use it in this way. Use it as a critical, as a media to critically engage with. Here's a game that's like terrible, maybe it's unethical and it's garbage. No offense to Call of Duty lovers, but you take the latest Call of Duty game and you can take that, bring it to the classroom and say, okay, let's talk about the military complex. Let's talk about Orientalism, right? This look of Arab communities, and how they're seen as enemies or as people to be saved.
Exactly. It doesn't just have to be an explicitly educational tool. We can actually take a lot of the tools that are out there that kids are playing and turn them and twist them into actual meaningful conversations with their students. And
people play games.
Exactly.
The people play games. You need the people to do the thing. It sounds dumb to say, but it
doesn't, right? Like, people play games is both like a very clear statement and very like obvious to people, but it's also important to be reminded about that when we're talking about making effective games. I appreciate you kind of framing it that way, and kind of this whole conversation as a whole has been really nice to like hear your perspectives on how we're implementing games, how we're using games, how we're able to connect that to pedagogy or not do so. So thank you for the time and sharing your thoughts with me. I mean, it's been in my opinion, a fast like 20 minutes, but it's been a good fast 20 minutes. And so thank you so much for being here and for being part of the event. And I look forward to kind of talking with you further about all of these themes. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to watching the panel.
Yeah, me too. It's starting in just under 10 minutes. So I'm going to end up this call, and I think we have to end up the Zoom because we have to load up another Zoom for the panel. So I will perhaps see you in the audience then there.
Will do. All right.
Have a